Don't read too much into our F-bombs, but absolutely keep reading. Content is explicit. You have been warned.
Welcome. You are listening to Reading Rainbow here with two best friends. Actually, Bewitch Banta.
With my skeptical best friend Amy over there.
And our resident believer, Krista.
We talk about the stars, the moon, the universe, spooky spiritual religions, cults, all that stuff.
And what I would call magical things.
But for real though, we do talk about wacky religions and spiritual things. And today is actually going to be focusing on religion for me, which I know I'm usually more the spiritual gal in the woo-ness, if you will. We are covering banned books. And you're like, why the hell are we covering that today? Well, it's newsworthy because on October 27th, the Public Religion Research Institute and the Brookings Institution released a new study that a majority of Americans don't support these crazy-ass right-wing book bans. But ironically, some say might hypocritically, or some might say hypocritically, they do support the Bible being taught in public school courses. So to me, it's like, what's up, America? Let's dig into this. And thought it was really cool. Nothing gets my gourd as a writer or journalist more than banned books. It is the worst and ultimate worst form of censorship. This dives into it and why it's such a power move on behalf of the conservatives these days. It really also ties into a lot of current events, i.e. the war going on right now, raging in Israel and Palestine. So we're going to get to that. It's a little depressing, but we do have a little bit of a happier note, speaking of Reading Rainbow, with our friend LaVar Burton, who was the host of Reading Rainbow back in our day when we were kiddos. That's why it's relevant. The study just came out October 27th. We're recording on November 10th, just a couple weeks ago. Most of my sources, by the way, came from this study and also an Axios article that reported these findings by Russell Contreras. He says that nearly 9 out of 10 Americans oppose banning these books. So they oppose taking them off the shelves for our students. And they oppose specifically depictions of slavery being taught in public schools, but a majority feel that public schools should still offer Christian Bible courses as electives, according to this study. I kind of do a little call and response exercise with you. All right. How many of these books have you either read or were you required to read on your school reading summer reading lists?
Am I about to be really embarrassed?
Say yes or no. The Color Purple.
No.
Of Mice and Men.
Yes.
That story breaks my heart. Lenny. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
I don't think so.
Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer.
I don't think so. Maybe. I have really bad memory.
And then Lord of the Flies.
No.
Those are just a very tiny sample of some of the most popular banned books. I'm going to give you the full top 10 list at the end. I just wanted to do a little low-key survey of like my education versus rural Indiana's education system. All of these were required for us, and now they're banned. And it's like, it just blows my mind.
I don't get this whole argument banning books because I think all it does is shine a spotlight on books and people want to read them more. You want so much control over what your kid's learning. At a certain point, I'm like, you should homeschool them then. If you want that much control, like, you don't have to punish every other kid because you're a crazy nutbag.
I couldn't agree more. Teacher, did you have any of those instances? Did Corey? Because he would have more the literature as a history teacher, like that he wasn't allowed to teach any of these.
We worked at schools where I think the parents weren't as involved. Most of the time, I was lucky because they would yell at their homeroom teacher when I did something to piss them off rather than me.
Those poor teachers. And well, it matters. I just loved a memory lane to Bisbee. Remember we saw the banned bookshelf and I was raced and took a picture with it because that's banned. We were banned from Bisbee, little bookshop, and it had a whole shelf of banned books and I was like all up in it. For real, you brought up exactly the point. It matters. Aside from censorship, the conservatives attack authors of her and the queer community at large. Into that, it's erasure. Dumbass parents, to your point just now, elementary school children are learning about critical race theory. I
don't even know how you would explain critical race theory to a first grader. They're not going to understand it. So first of all, even if heaven forbid a teacher was teaching that, which they're not, it would go over their head anyway. So I think you need to stop worrying about your kids.
Yeah, it's just crazy that these people really think that's happening. And aside from that, what they're doing is censoring and erasure. And
I think some people, like that group of the population, like thrives off living in fear. They're fearful of everything, of people that are different from them, like cultures that are different. Anything that's different, it's like they don't understand. They immediately just label as bad rather than trying to learn about it.
that's exactly what my whole theme is today of phenomenon, as you probably know, as a former educator. And in the last year and a half, America is an organization dedicated to free speech and human rights, and they recorded 1,362 instances of book bans in U.S. public schools, libraries, in the last school year, or from July 1st, 2022 to June 31st, 2023. And most of these bans were led, no surprise, by special interest groups like Moms for Liberty, Citizens for Defending Freedom, and Parents' Rights in Education. And they found these instances across 153 school districts. In our further, President Trump's election loss, 20, kept getting worse. More than 24 states have passed laws or adopted policies that limit the discussion of race and or gender, guise of banning graduate school critical race theory, as we just discussed. And PEN America, the human rights org, and ProBook was like, fuck this, we're fighting back. And they filed a lawsuit on May 17th this year. What part of it read?
A lawsuit against who, I guess?
Government, but that's a great question. I think it's against the schools and these books.
That'd be a lot of districts to go after, though.
The states, boards, perhaps. That question. I apologize, but they wrote in announcing this lawsuit, these bans removed student access to more than 1,500 unique book titles, the works of over 1,400 authors, illustrators, and translators. Authors whose books are targeted are most frequently female, people of color, and LGBTQ plus individuals. Growing climate of the censorship, school book bans continue to spread through coordinated campaigns by a vocal majority of groups and individuals, as a result of pressure from the state. End quote. Like the conservative state, it maybe they did file it against the state then, is what I'm guessing. And clearly bans are ploy and a play by conservatives to target people of color, women, and the queer community. Back to the numbers of that study on said book bans, study that I mentioned so this is a little bit more for you. So again, about 88% of Americans oppose banning books that tackle issues around slavery from being taught in public schools. And another 84% also oppose the banning of public high school courses like African American history. Ones say that the topics of slavery and segregation are likely to make white students feel, quote, guilty or uncomfortable.
Oh, heaven forbid someone feels uncomfortable for a few minutes. They're going to feel uncomfortable a lot of their life, so they better get used to it.
Yep, exactly. But the good news is 84% of oppose that reason for a ban. It's the most disheartening of all of the next set of stats. Up to that, percent of Americans favor offering elective courses on the Bible that are taught from a, quote, Christian perspective in public schools, compared with 43% who oppose them. And Republicans, no shit, are notably more likely than independents and Democrats to favor elective Bible courses in public schools.
Just go to church on Sunday. Why do you need it in school?
Just teach them yourself. Happening, remember, us are turning away from Christianity and organized religions in general in almost every episode, especially surgeons or any other religious topic. We was down to Americans are turning far and away from anything organized, traditional, quote unquote. Oh, seriously, really matters though. As I was saying earlier, it really will connect with horrific events happening right now in Israel and Palestine. Because, as we know, and you said this at the top so beautifully, books and stories of all kinds allow people to learn about humanity and worldviews of others. It promotes learning about ethnicities and genders and different faiths. But exactly like you said, without learning about this, people have no exposure to what the quote unquote opposing religion or worldview is, yet they hate it. And so this lack of understanding then begets lack of human empathy, which can lead to violence and hate. And again, we're seeing that right now with the wars. So, according to a November 3rd Baptist News article, which I thought was really interesting that it actually came from the religious source, they actually were very vocal about protecting freedom of religion, which I appreciated. But this article quoted that more than 300 acts of violence and discrimination against Sheiks were over 9/11. And then the problem is, because of this lack of education, lack of empathy, worldview, religion, many Americans confuse the Sikhs with Muslims. Again, we see this right now. So without this context, anyone else outside of these faiths might learn misplaced hatred. And obviously, this type of general ignorance is.
We've talked about this before, but we should do an episode about the Sikh religion because I feel like we've talked about that we don't really know much about it either.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more because I don't know much about it.
Why was there a big uptick on attacks on the Sikh community?
Because they had no worldview or because they didn't read or learn, right?
I think it comes down to people living in these small communities, and if they met these people, they'd realize that they're more similar than they realize.
Preach. 1,000%. Y'all bleed.
We always want to have love. We want good things for our family and friends. I don't know. It's just not that complicated at the end of the day.
We're human beings just trying to make it in this crazy ass world. That same article from the Baptist News as of November 3rd, Anisha Singh was quoted, and she is speaking of Sikhs, she's the executive director of the Sikh Coalition. And she told the Baptist News that one of the things we say often in the Sikh community is ignorance fuels animosity. And that's true today when you see this heightened anxiety and this heightened ignorance, this fear that is being perpetuated and spread when there's a conversation about banning books that can really grow our knowledge. An important tool to countering bigotry, she says, is working proactively to educate students, which includes raising them to read books to understand people of different faiths.
I know it really scares me how they're not going to be teaching about slavery in Florida schools
or anything gay related. Like, what? It's just crazy. Everybody's got rainbow in them. Do you want to know about more stats on the books that are being targeted? These are the top 10 most challenged books of all time, according to PEN America, the Human Rights Civil Liberties Organization. 1984 by George Orwell. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I loved that book, personally. It taught me empathy about enslaved people and people of color immediately, and I was like maybe 9 or 10 reading that book. Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Number 4 is The Color Purple by Alice Walker.
I only know about it because Oprah talked about it a lot.
Number 5 is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which I don't know why that's problematic. There's abuse in it, that like abuse happened.
Maybe they party.
Oh, maybe. But there's anything race related.
I couldn't tell you. I haven't read it.
Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by one of my favorite authors of all time, Maya Angelou. Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Hated that book, P.S. Once again, number 8 of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Number 9, What Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. And number 10, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, which was required reading for me.
Yeah, we had to read that.
And now it's one of the most banned books of all time, which is crazy to me. There may be, though, a silver lining in a very unexpected place, and that's from people of the faith community who support reading across all genres. That Baptist News article, as I said, really honed in on the intersection of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. This is a quote from from an advocate for reading and libraries who was quoted in that article. Quote, "This is a moment we cannot take lying down. We cannot have freedom of religion without freedom of speech," he said during an Interfaith Alliance briefing at Capitol Hill. It's a big deal when they're on Capitol Hill. "We cannot have freedom of religion without defending the right to read," according to library and reading advocate Tracy Hall. And you know what? She's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
That spoke to me so hard. But finally, to wrap it all up in a nice rainbow, do you remember the reading rainbow? Which I think you do, because you mentioned it at the top. So, former host of Reading Rainbow, LaVar Burton, was the honorary chair for Banned Books Week, which was actually the week of my birthday, which I thought was serendipitous. And he was on MSNBC, basically everything we're talking about today, that to sum up his words, talking about how most of these bans were instituted by such a small group of people that how can it be that we take this sweeping action for 1% of the population? He quoted an example of one woman wanted to ban The Hill We Climb, but she hadn't even read the book because she attributed Oprah, speaking of full circle, as the author. Oprah only read the foreword. So this woman hadn't even read the book, and yet she was scrambling to ban it.
That's ridiculous. I've talked about this before in our podcast, but in my local library growing up, a group of people were trying to ban Harry Potter. Someone said, "Have you read it?" And they responded, "No." And I was like, how can you ban a book you don't know anything about?
It's just wild. And again, he says these were motivated by a sense of fear by a certain sect of the population. We can't go backwards, he said, even though they want to drag us back. We should not be banning books in America in 2023. There's a conversation, he says, about being woke. And I just don't understand people who don't want to be awake. I agree, LaVar. Preach. Like, don't you want to know the world and the people and the languages and the cultures around you? Our world is so beautiful when you allow yourself to be open up to it. And yet this small population is just living in fear. We had a whole conversation in our last recording about how much I love language, and that's what books are. Language, right? Like, language is, it's beautiful to me, and I just don't understand. And storytelling, if we're going to talk about books, that's the essential foundation of humanity. That's how we communicated since day one, right? And so I just don't understand it. I'm with LaVar. I'm so confounded. I don't understand it.
You'll like
But
this on The View every Friday. Joy picks a banned book. She has a banned book club. They'll pick a book every Friday and highlight it and then give it to the audience.
it's amazing. I did not know that. As these are things we can do. We can buy the banned books and give them as gifts or read them ourselves. We can vote, and we can attend those PTO meetings if we have kiddos.
As a kid, you tell me something's banned, I want to do it. Or that would make me want to read it more. Like, it makes it more exciting. So it seems like it's backfiring. Rather, if they just kept quiet, people probably wouldn't even be talking about these books much. So here we are sitting and having these conversations right now about these books.
So in conclusion, Christianity sucks.
I'm on agreement with that. And actually, I think my next episode is going to highlight that a little bit.
Oh, excellent.
I'm going to cover this, but what I found was is like how a person who's atheist brain works differently than religious people.
Oh, very interested to hear that. So for real though, studies like this that I'm covering today are so crucial to get a pulse on not only what's happening right now, and again, just read. If you want to read the Bible, go read it. Keep that shit on school shelves. Keep the Quran, keep the Torah, keep whatever religious text you want on those shelves. Give anyone a choice to read whatever the hell they want to read. And if they choose to take it in their religious dogma and practice, that's their fucking right to do so. And it's like, I just can't stand how it's being pressured on a public school curriculum to be this one Christian lens. That's not okay. That's not fair. Every single text should be on those shelves if they want.
My thing is, shouldn't we be celebrating that kids are reading to begin with? Because it's hard to get kids motivated to read sometimes.
Read more, learn more, change the globe, which is a quote from Nas, the rapper. And that is something that's always going to be dear to my heart, that quote. So with that, I'm going to say peace, Bewitches, and read more, learn more, change the globe.
And I'll say be smart, Bewitches.
Thanks for listening. Check us out on Instagram or bewitchbanter.com. Suggestions for the show? Emails at bewitchbanter@gmail.com. Credits, Music Phantom Fun by Jonathan Boyle from premiumbeat.com. Podcast, edited and produced by Kristen Hinds and Amy Holt. As always, if you enjoyed, please rate, review, and subscribe.